Hello, and welcome back to Culture Conversations, the podcast where we explore workplace culture, behaviour, and leadership. I'm George.
And I'm Macdara. This is episode 5, and today we're diving into a topic that shapes organizational culture and every leader's impact: confidence.
Yeah, so the observant amongst you will notice that we're not in the same room as each other today. We haven't fallen out. We just decided to get this one recorded virtually. So firstly, we wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who submitted topics, suggestions for us to cover. Your engagement so far has been fantastic, but drum roll please, the winner of the, thank you Macdara, the winner of the £10 Nando's voucher for suggesting what we thought was the best topic is Ian Davis. So thank you, Ian.
Well done, Ian.
Bonus points for being an Arsenal fan as well. The Nando's gift card, one of us will be in contact with you and we'll put it in the post, probably more likely by email. So you get to drive the conversation and you land yourself some free chicken.
Happy
win
days.
win, right? Happy days. So yeah.
So there's quite a bit in this, and we really hope this is an insightful episode for everybody. So in terms of how we're going to tackle this topic of confidence, we're going to look at how critical confidence is to effective leadership. How do we build it in ourselves and others? And where's that line between healthy confidence and dangerous overconfidence?
Yeah, so stay with us, please, as we unpack this topic. What we hope is that we're going to leave you with that right balance that leaders need to strike. Enough confidence to inspire, but hopefully not so much that it blinds.
Yep. So with that, let's jump in. So, George, starting with a very simple question here. What do we mean by confidence in a professional context?
Yes, I think that's a great question, right? And I think, for anyone who's operated in a professional environment, you'll get the importance of confidence, the ability to lead, the ability to stand in front of large groups, the ability to conduct yourself, the ability to even outperform and then be willing to showcase, yourself, your colleagues, your team, your organization. All of those things kind of equal and equate to confidence. There is clearly a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And again, we've probably all seen that in the workplace where, arrogance might come to certain people almost by mistake. And it actually might be that they are trying to be confident. Maybe they are trying to be confident where they're actually not confident. They're trying to overcompensate, and it might come across as arrogance. But equally, I think confidence is clearly an important trait, right? So, you look at leaders through the years, through the generations, famous public figures who have showed confidence versus underconfidence. I like to think of when you look at, politicians, when they stand up at prime minister's question times or when they are in front of the press, the media, you think of confident politicians, or at least seemingly confident politicians like Barack Obama, like Tony Blair, who present themselves very well, who come across very confidently. You tend to buy into what they're saying. You tend to, feel more engaged with their message. Whereas someone who might be less confident or even unconfident, you might have less buy-in with their message. You might feel less drawn to what they're saying. And I think of, certainly not to pick on her, but I was with my sons this morning waiting to have their haircuts, and Liz Truss came on the TV, and she was talking to, I think it was a podcast that she'd done a guest appearance on, and her body language and what she was saying came across very unconfident. And therefore, I think as a viewer, as a listener, how you perceive the message can be diluted. I think certainly from my experience, I've had times in my career where I've been confident. That could be from a natural position of feeling like I'm in control, like I know what I'm doing, or it could equally be getting myself up for an important interview or an important presentation, important client pitch. I think there are two ways of creating that confidence, either through being naturally confident and feeling confident going into something, or maybe it's that you're able to get yourself up for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever, for that important, delivery of something, or on a more ongoing basis. What about you, Macdara?
Yeah, you have captured it well there. I think it can be different in different settings. Are we talking about, being an effective leader? Obviously, you need to project confidence into your people, that they buy into what you're saying, that they believe that you can, help the people in your organization when you go to fight for them, across the broader organization. But it can also be confidence in your ability versus how you project confidence. So, that's something we'll talk about in terms of, we've all come across people who are absolutely phenomenal at their job. They are subject matter experts, but maybe when called upon to speak in a meeting, get very nervous and come across far less capable than they are. So that can also be an issue versus the people we know who maybe actually don't have a clue what about the subject matter or their jobs, but project confidence. And that can be frustrating if you're somebody who lacks confidence, but actually is very good at their job. But similarly, a confident leader who has the right people behind them doing the work, doesn't always need to be down in that level of detail. So I think confidence is very subjective to you. But in this, as we said, we'll try to unpick how to build confidence in yourself, how to build it in others. And yeah, we can talk a bit about obviously where we've seen uber confident people kind of crash and burn a bit.
Yeah, so that overconfidence as well, it becomes quite a fine balance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to get it right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So look, I think we've probably got the building blocks hopefully covered. And you spoke a little bit there around kind of building confidence and something we're going to talk about. In your view, Macdara, is confidence something that we are born with and is, has to be natural? Or is it something that can be built over time?
You can definitely build confidence, and some people are never going to become that super slick communicator, but absolutely. And, in terms of some of the coaching that I have done and that you and I have done as mentors and managers is about helping people build that confidence. And, maybe I've seen in the past people who didn't get a promotion in a previous round, but that I've helped and others have helped build, their own confidence, but also that broader confidence in that individual. And, I've really seen people transform both in terms of themselves and their perception over time. So yeah, absolutely, it can be built.
Okay, great. So look, I think with that, let's jump into our first topic, which is building self-confidence.
Great.
Okay, so one thing you mentioned there, Macdara, which is obviously something we're going to try and cover now through building self-confidence, is that journey from becoming someone who might be unconfident to becoming someone who's more confident. It would be really useful, I think, if we could maybe talk about some practical tips for staff and leaders to strengthen their own confidence.
Yep, sure. So I would start with being prepared, and having that competency. So if you we've all been there, you've got to go to a meeting. You and I, George, have worked a lot on maybe something like a new business proposal in your job. So say the business want to roll out a new product, and you and I in the past have been tasked with working across the organization to understand how feasible that is, what the barriers might be, maybe from legal, tax, operations, the various different parts of the business. That can be a nerve-wracking process. And when you have to go in front of experts across the different parts of the business. You kind of need to know your stuff.
Mm.
What's important there is to be prepared. Make sure that when you go into that meeting, you either have the knowledge yourself or you've brought people along with you to say, this isn't my area, but I've brought X person who is a very strong in terms of the detail on this. So I guess that's an example. But for any meeting or any interaction, just make sure you're prepared. Unless it's something that you're super confident about and you've done a million times, taking that time. We're all busy. You're running from one meeting to the next, but making sure that you're looking ahead of time at your calendar for that day or week and going, oh yeah, that's the danger meeting that's coming up this week. That's the one where I could really, mess up because I'm a bit shaky on that. So putting that work in ahead of time to be prepared and ready for questions that may come your way.
And it really, sorry, just it really is noticeable, isn't it, when you go into a meeting or a forum or a presentation where someone has prepared versus someone who hasn't prepared. And it makes me think of one of my favorite sayings, which is failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And I think it's so true when it comes to confidence.
Yeah. Roy Keane, Saipan, that was his favorite.
Oh, yeah, I can't believe you brought up Roy Keane. But yes, very, very good footballer, fellow Irishman. I'll let you have that one.
Well, it always stuck in my mind because he was adamant about it at the time. But
and the other point around bringing the right people with you, and I've seen this so often, particularly in a consulting environment, Macdara, where whether it's people feel proud and they don't want to admit they don't know something, they don't want to bring others along, but actually, being able to hunt in packs is a saying that we used to use, where you bring along 2-3 people, as long as it's appropriate to the meeting.
Yeah, of course.
And at the very least, drawing on their expertise if you're going to go without them, spending some time with them, lifting from their brains the most important things to talk about before you go in. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing I would talk about is looking at what you've done in the past to build confidence for what you're trying to do at the moment or want to do in the future. And, in my own coaching that I've done, this is a very well-known technique to try and get people to reflect on what they've managed to achieve in the past and how they've already, are doing what maybe the thing that they're lacking confidence in. So that's important to sit down and think, okay, what have I achieved over the last 3-6 months or in previous roles or previous career iterations and to think, oh, actually, yeah, you know what? I'm not as bad at this as I thought I was, or I should be able to speak about this and I'm fine. You got this kind of thing. So that's important.
Sometimes it can also be about, you might not want to raise something because it's not a perfect match. You think, oh, it's slightly different, so I won't talk about it. But often, let's say in a job interview, you go in and you get asked a question and you don't know the answer, or you're not familiar with the subject matter. Being able to say, I've not done that exact thing before, but I have done something quite similar. I'm going to draw upon it and I will learn the rest really quickly.
Yeah.
Can be just as impressive.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And you've shown that lateral thinking to connect the two up as well, which is strong. So I think a lot of those can tackle some of the issues that people have around imposter syndrome, fear of failure, perfectionism. In terms of that reflection and preparedness can definitely help with that. Also, and we'll get into this, but also look for feedback, right, from other people. Either I always think with it, make sure you choose the right people to get feedback from. And somebody who's going to give it to you in a constructive way, and somebody who kind of knows what they're talking about, right? We've all been there where you ask for feedback and next thing you're getting absolute shoeing on every time you go and speak and everything. Oh, you should have done this. Oh, and actually that was terrible. And, I've had that from when I've asked maybe my line manager for feedback and all of a sudden you're getting, too much feedback or uber critical feedback. So I would choose somebody who you think is the right level of emotional intelligence and insight to help you with the feedback, and who also you kind of rate, I guess, in terms of their confidence and their communication skills. So somebody who you've admired there, maybe how they conduct themselves in meetings or otherwise. So they would be two critical factors that I would pull out in terms of when getting feedback, that you consider, who you're getting it from, is super important as well.
Yeah, so it's drawing on that, the perspectives of others, the experience of others who may have stood in the shoes that you're looking to stand in the past. They might have got the battle scars from going through something. Again, looking for that near match type thing where it might be they say they can give you tips and advice on something very near, like a close match. You might find that gets you 90% of the way there, and that then builds confidence because you're only then having to learn or make a best guess at 10% or less of the kind of subject matter.
Yeah, and obviously choosing someone who's in these forums is key, right? So there's no point in getting feedback from somebody who's not seeing you in real time actually try to do this stuff.
Yeah. And again, I think there is that little piece of not being too proud.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to feel like we are the experts in everything, because I don't think anyone is. And being able to build that confidence from drawing on people around you, creating that almost team mentality so that it actually becomes, you're succeeding as a group. You're drawing on the best of ideas from across a team or an organization can be quite powerful. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so look, I think hopefully we've covered building self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe now we can jump into generating confidence in others.
Yeah, let's do that. So we've had a good chat about building confidence in yourself and how we do that, George. So next, what about how we help others build that confidence and how we generate confidence in other people?
Yeah, so again, a great question, right? I think for me, one of the most important things in being a good leader is being able to empower the people around you, is being able to back them both publicly, but also behind closed doors. And as you and I both know, Macdara, that is really noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
Not just from a recognition perspective, but also from the perspective of creating that trust and that confidence, right? So if a person feels like they've got the respect, the ear, the willingness to have buy-in from their from their management team and from their leadership, it creates confidence. It makes that person feel like what they're doing is the right thing, and they're going to be backed by those leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I would say around people as well is offering stretch opportunities. So again, you and I have worked in big organizations. Sometimes what you find is there's a temptation to give the same sorts of tasks and projects to the same person or people over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Now, in the very short term, that can mean a project gets done, right? Tick, move on. But what that probably doesn't do is create confidence and an ability to grow and learn across a team or an organization. So it's looking for opportunities to get others involved, to give them those stretch opportunities.
Yeah, with the right support, obviously, which is key, right? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then thinking a bit about projects. You and I have spoken a lot around business storytelling, creating a narrative, sharing that across an organization. I think when it comes to projects and initiatives, to create that confidence as a leader, it's about having a really strong vision. And this is not just the kind of boilerplate headline banner of a vision. This is also being able to say, if we do this, it's going to lead to this. So drawing a straight line between, hopefully, input and outcome is really key, and it can create that confidence and that willingness to engage in a piece of work. And then on an ongoing basis, ensuring there's transparent communication. So what that means to different firms can be very different,
Yeah.
right? But ensuring it's there is really key, and it helps maintain ongoing confidence in an initiative, and then celebrating successes as well. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of when people are head down working on a project, particularly if it's a really long one, celebrating that success. The smallest win from from the smallest win right the way through to the biggest kind of milestone, celebrating it, making it visible, putting it front and center, it makes people feel valued, it makes their efforts feel seen, and again, it's creating that confidence across an organization.
Yeah, and that is all about that transparency in the project, that everybody is clear what's happening, where they're at. When people lose that visibility, they lose interest and confidence, and everyone's super busy and they start to step away. And when you lose that engagement, you get into trouble. To your celebrating point, absolutely. I think that's also where the transparency comes through, because something from the outside that may look very simple to have solved, we've all come against these big issues in a project, that require a lot of buy-in and effort to solve. When everyone who's involved in the project knows how painful that was, that really helps them with the celebration. If they understand the pain, they've seen what everybody had to do to fix that issue, and then everyone comes together to really celebrate that win. It's a great feeling for everybody.
Yeah. And look, really to kind of build on the individual confidence point, right? And I can speak from personal experience, but I know it will probably be the same for you. Is I can remember the times when leaders have spent time with me and on me, making me feel like what I'm doing is right, or giving me pointers and tips and hints, and that even just spending time with a leader can help to create confidence, because it shows that you're seen and you're valued and you're not just a cog in a wheel. You're actually someone who leaders and the organization is willing to spend time with. And what you find is when you start to build collective confidence, it can almost be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that people start to feel confident, so they help their colleagues feel more confident, and that collective confidence really then starts to drive resilience. And that clearly means, you're hopefully going to have less attrition and people looking to leave because they feel valued, but also innovation as well. So if someone is, feels a bit beaten down and a bit unconfident, or a bit like they're not valued, are they going to be willing to, stick their hand up and say, I've got a really innovative idea? It's probably less likely. So I think there are a number of wins that come from just spending time investing in our people and making them feel the best versions of themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And it reminds me a bit of, there's a book by Susan Cain called Quiet, about kind of the introverts, and she's done a TED talk where she says there's zero correlation between the best speaker in the room and the person with the best ideas. So it's really important that the less confident speakers have the confidence to bring their ideas to the table. And obviously that speaks to psychological safety that we've covered in one of our previous podcasts. But yeah, that's really important. And it's also important that leaders and managers take responsibility for building confidence in their team. It's not really something someone's going to go and figure out by themselves, and it can be broken very, it's a very fragile thing. And I've had experiences where it fluctuates in your career as well, right? So there can be roles where you are smashing it, you're feeling really confident, your manager's bought into you, they're giving you good feedback, and sometimes it can feel like it's just so easy. You're working hard, but it's nothing is too challenging, versus one where you're just treading through treacle and every meeting is a nightmare, and you're getting henpecked on. You come out of a meeting and your manager's saying, that wasn't great, and this and that, and that can get chipped away quite quickly. So there, the leader manager needs to take responsibility. You as an individual need to take a hard look at the organization that you're in as well, right? And your own line management, etc. And think, is this me or is it the organization? That also plays a part in it as well.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, perhaps we start talking about overconfidence.
Yeah.
Which is the other side of that fine balance we spoke about. But let's jump into that.
Sure. So next up, George, is pitfalls of overconfidence. Something you know a bit about?
Joking. Oh, scathing. How did I know that was coming though? No, happy to talk about it. And we've spoken a bit around the fine balance, or the balancing act maybe, between confidence and arrogance, and probably then at the other end of the spectrum, unconfidence. And ideally you want to be right in the middle of that kind of spectrum, so that you're able to portray yourself confidently, but you're not tipping into arrogance and overconfidence. So it's probably worth just calling out a few warning signs. If I'm a person who manages by metrics, I can be quite boring in that way. But if I imagine having like a scorecard, things would start flashing up when someone is, or yourself is, acting in an overconfident way, such as dismissing feedback, right? We've both seen it. I'm sure many of the listeners have seen it, where someone is so confident in their idea, their ability, whatever it might be, that they become deaf to feedback, that they, even if feedback is raised in a constructive way, even if it's really good feedback, it gets dismissed. It's, I know best, we know best, our project is the best, whatever, head down, full steam ahead type mentality. And clearly that's a warning sign. So that'd be the first warning sign for me. The second one, speaking as a previous risk manager, someone who used to operate in that space, is someone who underestimates risk, or the risks of what they're doing or not doing, potentially. Being very headstrong with something, and almost, whatever the consequences are, we're going to go full steam ahead. Some occasions that's correct and it's the right thing to do. But again, it could be a warning sign for me if someone is, really kind of not observing risk, not trying to mitigate risk, irrespective of whether it's the right thing to do. And then the third one I would call out would be over-promising as well. And I think we've probably both seen this in our careers, whereby people don't always do it intentionally, but they might slip into over-committing, to over-promising. And sometimes that comes with under-delivering. And that's a real challenge on a number of levels. But it can also really start to erode trust, because if commitments get broken on a repeat basis, that overconfidence suddenly starts to look misplaced.
Yeah, absolutely. And, seeing that in many different guises, as you say, where people maybe overestimate their own ability, or just are a bit lax, right? And neglectful in terms of the risks, as you say, where they're hoping for best case scenario, because they either can't be bothered, or they just haven't thought about something, they haven't done their due diligence, and then it blows up in everyone's face. The other side of it, I think, in terms of the feedback is, as you say, particularly when I've managed people and maybe they have a good relationship with stakeholders, and they're delivering for very specific stakeholders who tell them that they're doing a great job all of the time. But as your role as their line manager, you see a different picture, and you are maybe trying to push them for promotion. You need them to deliver in other areas of their responsibilities, but they're kind of tone deaf to that. And maybe feedback is one we can do a separate podcast on. But sometimes you need to be very careful with those individuals to really paint that picture for them, because they are getting such good feedback day to day with the people they interact with. And also a lot of stakeholders, as a line manager, will give you feedback that they won't give the individual because they don't want to have to give them bad feedback. So they just give it to you instead. And you need to do something with it. But that's an issue I've seen with people who are overconfident. Some of that is being, I guess, bred by the fact that they are doing very well in certain aspects of their role, but they may well have some blind spots that they really need to work on.
Yeah, and I think you've mentioned some really great ways there that we can hopefully avoid this. I think other kind of suggestions for how to avoid overconfidence would be, and it sounds a bit of an obvious one, but really challenge yourself to be kind of humble and to show that humility, and then try and encourage it in your teams as well, right? So being vulnerable, I mean, it's used so often as a term, it almost becomes a bit throwaway, but being able to be vulnerable, being able to show that it's okay to fail, showing that it's okay to to ask questions and not have to be right all the time. If you start with that as a leader and try to have that message across the organization, it can be really powerful, right? And the other side of that coin is the curiosity element as well. So when using that analogy again, when you're head down, no, I'm right, this project's right, we're not going to look at anything else, people are going to stop being curious because they feel so bulldozed by an idea or an initiative or a way of working. They're going to stop being curious because they say, well, even if I am curious and I ask the right questions, my leader or the project or whatever it is not going to take on board what I'm trying to say anyway. Right?
Yeah, so there's no point in raising anything.
You become quite downtrodden almost. Yeah. And then I think another kind of key element that we can all look to use as leaders, I spoke before about being someone who's worked in risk, someone who's led by metrics quite a lot. I always try to encourage people to build confidence, but not become so confident through using data, through using analytics, through using things that are, you mentioned subjectivity, Macdara. When it comes to confidence and decision making, if we can back up what we're saying through objective means, then actually confidence might be okay, because it might be the data is telling us certain things, but they're the right things because we've brought in the metrics and the information that is from a proven source. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we have that check and challenge through using data and metrics to back up what it is that we're going to do, right? Rather than coming to a decision and then using the metrics to prove that reverse kind of way of doing it.
Yeah, and that can change the perception of an individual or teams where some area within that function has always been perceived in a certain way. If you come in and turn it around, you can very quickly maybe show data that backs that up. But rather than trying to explain it, you can go, right, well, we've gone from 10% to 50% improvement in this area. That's kind of, people can't dispute that, and that will stick with people, right? If you put that up in a meeting, put that in front of people, that will stick.
Yeah, and it helps you as well when you're delivering a message, when it's backed up by something factual, scientific, data-led. You can feel more confident in what you're doing, right? Because you have that basis in truth rather than basis in emotion or just a hunch. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Okay. So with that, let's wrap up.
So time for some closing reflections, George, and for everybody, obviously. Hopefully, we've demonstrated that confidence is something that goes across the organization and shapes leadership in so many different ways. It can drive momentum. It can bring new ideas to the table. It can help people outperform and really step above where they might have gone otherwise. They're, some of the key pieces. Sorry, George. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just think, it sounds a bit broken record, but it is a gentle balance though, right? I think unchecked, or it going just over that line of confidence versus arrogance, overconfidence, it can end up derailing teams and decisions. So I guess what would be your key takeaways based on, the parts we've gone through?
Yeah, we've looked at building your own confidence through, being prepared, reflecting on your performance, I guess, in different scenarios, getting that feedback and practicing, taking on board the feedback. Then how we can help others build confidence through supporting those individuals, giving them constructive feedback, building that trust between them and the broader organization. And finally, protecting against overconfidence. So making sure you're using data, you're getting feedback, you're acting and behaving with humility, in your role. They're, the kind of key pieces, I think, that I would call out.
Fantastic. And look, we'd love to keep this conversation going, right? We're conscious that we have these conversations as the two of us in these kind of 4 screen walls. But we would actually love to hear from people your stories, whether you agree, whether you disagree. Have you seen confidence or overconfidence making the biggest impact? So please do get in contact with us. Share your thoughts by commenting on the vodcast, the LinkedIn post, by sending us an email. We would really love to kind of hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah. And more generally, any feedback on what we've been doing here in terms of what's worked well, what hasn't worked so well, what we could do differently. We're new to this, episode 5 today. So yeah, just it'd be great to get feedback from folks to help us, deliver what you want to see and hear.
Yeah, and on that note, our next episode, we're going to be picking up one of the other topics that came out from someone sending it in. And that is culture, behavior, and leadership in a hybrid work environment, which is clearly becoming more and more, the case for a lot of people now. So Thank you to Simon Bryant for suggesting that one. But until then, I'll say goodbye from him.
That's goodbye from me.